Hey everyone, my name is Jeff McClarty. I'm the creative pastor here at Mountain View, and today we're going to be talking about Pastor Daniel's new book, Confident But Conflicted. And specifically, I've been given chapter 3 to go over, and it's one chapter that I relate really well with, and it's actually in the last season of my life, really kind of, this spoke to me coming out of that season and helped me kind of take the next step forward. And the title of the chapter is Divine But Discouraged, and trust me, I don't think I'm divine. But the discouraged part of it, I've lived through quite a bit in the last year, and feeling beaten down and broken down, and knowing that God is real and knowing that God can do the miraculous, but still being discouraged in the midst of the circumstances I'm in. And we start off, Pastor Daniel starts talking about kind of an experience in his life where he was an athlete in high school, and his parents kind of were setting him and his brothers up for success, and were trying to get them into college, and the goal was to get scholarships and be able to go to college, and honestly to have a better life than his parents had. But God placed a call on his life, and which was discouraging to his parents, but also their reaction was discouraging. And I can relate really well when I first told my family that I wanted to go into the ministry, wanted to be a full-time pastor. There was a lot of kind of worry for me. They were worried and concerned, pastors don't make a lot of money, and we want you to have a good life and be able to take care of a family and all those things. And so the reaction that I had from my family was discouraging to me, and it made me feel like, oh man, they don't even have anyone has my back. And so it was kind of interesting. We started out talking about that, and then he went into talking about Jesus, who is the ultimate example, who we say as Christians we're trying to model our lives after. Well, Jesus faced a very tough and discouraging circumstance in his life with the beheading and murder of his cousin, John the Baptist. And Herod had kept John around, and there was a whole backstory, and it's kind of a disturbing backstory, but John basically told Herod the truth and said, this isn't right, what's going on here, what you're doing isn't right. And he was imprisoned, and fast forward, Herod, at the whim of a young lady, beheaded John the Baptist, and John the Baptist, or John's followers, disciples, buried him and then had to break the news to Jesus. And when you see this, it shows the pure divinity but also pure humanity of Jesus. When they told Jesus what had happened, they told Jesus that his cousin had been murdered, had been beheaded, he immediately withdrew from where he was at and went away and got alone. And I don't know about you, but when I'm discouraged, the last thing I want to do is hang out with a bunch of people. The last thing I want to do is be around people and have to explain why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. I want to get away. I want to take some time. I want to be by myself. I want to spend time with God. And that's exactly what Jesus did. Jesus, instead of continuing on and pushing through and putting on a smiling face and saying things like, oh, well, at least we know he's in heaven. Instead, he withdrew. He took time to mourn, took time to really get with God and say, the human part of me doesn't understand this. I don't understand why this had to happen. And so we see a picture of a divine healer, miracle worker, God himself pulling away, stepping away from the ministry, stepping away from what he was doing to get right, to mourn. And personally, life has a way of decapitating our dreams and cutting off our hopes and really just severing close relationships. And when that happens, we need an example of what to do. And I think Jesus is a prime example here. We see Jesus pull away, and too often we go through hell all week, and then we show up to church and we act heavenly, and that's not what we're called to do. That's not who we are. We're not called to put on a show and be fake and act like everything's okay. It's okay to mourn. It's okay to be discouraged. It's okay to have those doubts and fears and struggles. You wouldn't be human without it. And we even see God himself struggling, but we tend to try and put on the happy face and push through. And it's not the way we're supposed to live. From the book specifically, Pastor Daniel said it might do you some good just to let yourself go. Admit you did not expect this person to walk out of your life after all the promises they made. Admit you didn't expect your spouse to walk out after 23 years of marriage. Admit you didn't expect the divorce papers to arrive on your doorstep so soon. Admit you didn't expect to have a miscarriage after you just painted the baby's room. Admit you didn't expect to say goodbye so soon to a child you never got to hold. Admit that after 37 years of hard work, you did not expect to be replaced just before retirement. Admit that you did not expect that after raising your kids in church, they would turn out this way. Some of you today need to stop trying to fake it until you make it. You need to come into the house of God. You need to come to where your fellow believers and friends and family, your church family is, and you need to allow yourself to break. Jesus had to go and recuse himself from the crowds. He knew what was coming. He knew he had a greater purpose in ministry, and he knew that he needed to take the time to get right in his heart, right in his mind with God, and he needed to mourn, and he needed to deal with this discouragement so that what came next he could fulfill. Jesus had a huge ministry ahead of him, and there was a lot that needed to be done. And if he had allowed the discouragement in those moments to take over, if he had allowed the discouragement to take over his mind and his heart, he would not be ready and could not do what was coming next. The Bible says in Matthew chapter 5, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." It's okay to deal with discouragement. It's okay to feel broken. But we don't want to stay there. See, the path to healing is not wallowing in what we are, but it's often through our brokenness. The only alternative to being broken is becoming bitter. If you want to become an old, crusty, mean person that's bitter about everything, don't allow your brokenness to be exposed. Don't allow yourself to mourn. Hold on to those feelings inside. Don't release them. Don't allow others to help you shoulder that burden. You can remain bitter. And one of the things Pastor Daniel's been talking to us as a staff about has been about getting better with age. Don't become crusty and old and bitter, but become more whimsical, become more excited about life and about what's happening. Don't allow yourself to get bitter. There's a time to break, and that's healthy and good. But when the time comes, you need to be ready to put yourself back together. You can't do that if you don't allow yourself to be broken in the first place. We can be broken, but the next step is to continue forward, push forward. When Jesus landed, after he had been out on the boat, when Jesus landed and put his feet back on shore, the large crowd he saw that had been gathered and following him around, he saw them. He had compassion on them and healed their sick. Matthew 14:14. Jesus went away to get right, and he came back on the other side ready to do right, to do what God had called him to do. Get yourself together. Have your brokenness. Get yourself together. Stop blaming other people. Stop casting doubt and fear and all that. Stop allowing all of that to control who you are. Stop blaming your ex. Stop blaming your parents. I know you're hurt. I know you're dealing with it, but people need your help. So as Jesus gets off the boat, he saw they're sick and he healed them. He had compassion on them. See, if we don't get right, we can't be an aid to those who need us. We're going to be walking down the road. We're going to be walking to our jobs. We're going to be talking to our neighbors, and we're going to see someone that's broken and needs Jesus and needs life. And if we're not prepared and we haven't dealt with our brokenness and we haven't been broken before the Lord, laid it bare, got right, got ready to do what's next, we cannot minister to those people. See, that's what we're called to do. We're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We have to deal with our brokenness. There's someone just like you out there who's dealing with your brokenness, who's dealing with their brokenness, that needs you. There's someone that's going through exactly what you've been through. There's someone that could relate to your story and could see the overcoming that you've done, and they could be an encouragement to, but you have to step forward. If you want to overcome discouragement, then help others overcome theirs. One of the fastest ways to break out of a funk is to aid others. during Christmas time, my kids were all, well, two of my boys, I have three boys, and two of them are old enough to understand what presents are and get excited about it. And my oldest, Beckham, he kept asking about his presents and where's my present? Do I get this? Do I get that? And finally, my wife and I had enough, and we said, listen, you need to worry about your presence. This is not what the season's about. The season's about giving to others and sharing hope. And we had to refocus our son's attitude. And if we had not ourselves focused our hearts and dealt with the selfishness in our own hearts, we wouldn't be able to guide him. See, we are called as parents, as people, as Christians to help others. And we can't do that if we're leading from a broken spirit. We have to move past, move on, allow God to work in our hearts. One of my favorite verses in Joshua 1:9, God said to Joshua, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. We as Christians are called to be strong and courageous in our faith and who God has called us to be. The final kind of note from Pastor Daniel, he calls it a sermon in a sense in the end, says, let yourself go, get yourself together, and give yourself away. Ultimately, we want to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We want to lead others to a saving knowledge in him, and we want to share the joy, hope, and peace that comes with being a follower in Christ. But we would need to live in those. We need to deal with our disappointments and our hurt. We need to understand and be encouraged that God himself, who came in the form of Jesus, when he was in a human flesh, dealt with discouragement. But he didn't stay there. He moved on. There is hope for tomorrow. There is a brighter day ahead. Those aren't just phrases. That's truth, because we have Jesus.